The panel discussion that will follow is about the cyber resilience in Europe and the building of trust through security by design and supply chain protection, a panel hosted by Mastercard. And the panel will explore the impact of the Cyber Resilience Act and other key initiatives on improving security by design, supply chain integrity, and overall cybersecurity in Europe's digital ecosystem, while assessing the readiness and the challenges for its implementation. And I would like to welcome the speakers of this panel, Mr. David NOEL-LARDIN, Vice President, Product and Sales, IAM Devices, Thales. Hello, thank you. Please join us and have a seat. Mr. Tiberiu BARABOI, founder, Expertware, Romania. Dr. Matthias, SACHS, Cybersecurity Policy Lead for Europe, Google. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Alec Peterson, Vice President of AWS Resilience, Amazon Web Services. Steve Brown, Vice President of Mastercard Cybersecurity Solution Services, Europe. Thank you all so much for joining us, and the moderator will be Mrs. Roxana RADU, Associate Professor of Digital Tech and Public Policy, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be back home, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to have a discussion around cyber resilience in Europe with one of the most distinguished panels you could ever get for this kind of conversations. So I'm really pleased to be able to moderate this panel today. But I also looked around the room today, and you have been a bit silent, so we're going to try to change that. And you've been an amazing audience, but we want you to be a bit more engaged. So let's do that in two ways. First, we'll start with taking the room temperature, just so we can situate the discussion a little bit better. And then, towards the end of the discussion, we'll reserve a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. So please feel free to prepare those in advance or as we go through the discussion, and then somebody will come with the microphone to you. Let's see how people feel in the room this morning. So I'll ask you two questions, and I'd like to see a show of hands. So the first question has to do with your preparedness for the Cyber Resilience Act, which will be the main focus of our discussion today. How many of you feel prepared for this new package? Let's see a show of hands. It's all right to do comme ci, comme ça. We see a couple of hands, but I can say in honesty that there are less than 10 hands up. That says quite a bit. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. And the second question, then, for everybody in the audience, how many of you, and this gets a lot more personal now, how many of you feel that they could lose their job over a cyber security incident that has to do with supply chain? So over a supply chain incident, how many of you could lose their jobs? One person in the panel. Thanks for your honesty. Nobody in the room. That's interesting. Okay, we'll explore that further. Wonderful. So thank you for at least keeping this at the back of your mind. I'm not entirely convinced that the second answer we got were very honest, but let's leave it at that. And in the interest of time, because this panel is right before lunch, I hope we can maximize the available time to get to hear from our speakers. So I'll dive directly into some of the questions we have. We'll just do a couple of rounds of questions to the panelists, and then we'll come back to you. So let's start with the first one. In the morning, we've talked a lot about NIS2, and at this point in time, we're going to focus on the Cyber Resilience Act in Europe. So thinking about this new piece of legislation and how it's shaping the cybersecurity practices on the continent, could you tell us a little bit more about what companies feel are the key challenges and how you're starting to address this with the implementation of the CRA. And in particular, we can focus on the supply chain protection and on secure by design. I don't know if we should start with Alec at the end, yes? And let's just get to each panelist.
Yeah, there we go. Sure. Yeah, so secure by design, as I just mentioned in the talk that I gave, is really core to how AWS operates, and it's something that we've taken very seriously, and really removing a lot of security concerns from what customers need to worry about in terms of security of the cloud, of that infrastructure, and really allowing customers to focus on their own application logic and then securing that and giving them the tools to make that happen. As far as the CRA itself is concerned, the products that are in scope there's actually relatively few AWS products themselves that are going to be in scope because of just what it is. There's plenty of other regulations that target us, so there's certainly nothing to worry about in terms of us having the right level of oversight. But in terms of what I think is where some of the challenges are, there are a lot of products that are potentially in scope. I think I saw somewhere 600,000 products are in scope the way it's currently defined, and a lot of these are made by small companies. They're relatively inexpensive products. Think like smart light bulbs, smart toasters, things like that, and putting a lot of additional, really any additional complexity into them, like that's going to be challenging just to make the product work. And then these companies need to then deal with the regulations themselves. So I think that that's one angle that I think as we look at how this the goal of having secure products is a laudable one, but how that turns into practice is going to be an important one. One other one that is related in terms of making it into practice is how change management is handled when an issue is found. I'm sure you all were either affected or aware of a pretty big change management issue that affected much of the world this summer. And there's a lot of learnings to come from that, but I think one of the biggest ones is things that are being done for the purposes of security can potentially have resilience knock-ons if they're not managed in the correct way. So that's something I think would need to be paid attention to.
Thank you, and first thank you for inviting me in this panel. It's a great pleasure to be there today to share with you. Working in Thales, so definitively in Thales, due to our historical business, security and security by design is our DNA. Whatever it is for the defense environment or for the aerospace or the space industry. So taking on this DNA, we have as well in Thales the duty to deliver some solution to our customers to continue to work on this cybersecurity framework. So definitively the CRA is for us perceived as a huge opportunity and a huge, in fact, way to continue in what we want to achieve, which is a sort of unified framework of security to bring to all the customers, the partners, the ecosystem, a unified framework of security and increase on that. So it's a great opportunity to improve on standardization. We discussed a lot this morning about the regulation, but behind the regulation we will have the standardization. The standard will be a key factor to help and to support every entity, every organization to improve as well their cybersecurity topic. Indeed, nevertheless, it represents a lot of challenge. I'm totally sharing what you said, and there is a lot of companies, it was said this morning as well, a lot of organizations that need to allocate resources, legal resources, human resources, technical resources, and it is very complex for a lot of organizations in the European market, but as well in the world, to comply with all this regulation and this cybersecurity. So that's what, at the industry level, it is as well our duty to provide the maximum of standardization, the maximum of solutions that will help them to achieve this target.
Hi, I represent the SMEs and we are not Amazon, although we respect them very much. And what we see is all this regulatory burden affects all the SMEs, and we have to maybe look a little bit chronologically. We have the NIS2, which comes after the NIS2 of the US, which, yes, we have to comply with it. But today, not all the organizations, today the European states didn't yet nominate all the companies who should respect that regulation. And after that, we have the CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act, and the last edition, which again, it's the most technical one, but the most precise, the DORA, which affects all the financial institutions. All of them, in fact, they are made, and the purpose, the goal is noble, to make us safer, to make our products safer, to have our kids safe in an online world, because everything is connected. And today your fridge can be hacked, your light bulb can be hacked. And it's, I would say, we have to start pragmatical, because we have to look, the SMEs, they do not have the money, the power, the competencies to comply unless we help them. We need to give them wizard-like, we need to give them guidance, we need to first help them, make them aware if they have to comply with one, the second, or the third regulatory framework, or even the fourth, because there is a AI Act as well. For the cyber resilience, maybe I would go to the core, because being a small company, I am looking from where I start, and I would start from software bill of materials. So every provider of a connected device needs to be aware that it needs to trace back all the libraries, all the software components which are added to that final product, which will end probably on Amazon, eBay, or any other global marketplace. But that awareness and giving them the tools, today it's not yet, we do not have the blueprints. How do I do that? Fast, easy, with a low cost, so at least to know where I am today. So I would start from creating that awareness, giving them the blueprints or the tool sets of how they can find the software bill of materials, at least which components might require attention, because today I would say there are a lot of software, 70% of them it's open source, but who will go into that open source code and look for all the vulnerabilities, logical traps which may be there, and if there is an attempt hacker, will go and will exploit one of those, and will affect not one product, but all the products which use that library potentially. And there are many such attacks. We had the SSH attack this year. Yes, we need to start somewhere, and I would start from the software bill of materials, tracing back and going into, because there is a regulatory and a legal obligation as well to go upstream of all the suppliers which provided us as an SMEs components or pieces of software which are in the end finding their way into our product. We need to find them and to have as well the legal framework with them. So if they detect a vulnerability, they need to report it in time. Even having all these portals, or at least gateways of where they should come and report those to facilitate, I would start trying to facilitate those things. I don't know if that resonates for SMEs, but there are many and they don't have the workforce and the power of big companies, and I would start pragmatical to try to cover as much, as broad as possible.
Yeah, thanks for having me on behalf of Google. I can immediately second you here, Tiberiu. I think SMEs are at the center of what we need to discuss here. First of all, let me say, for us at Google, we appreciate the CRA being in existence. We think it's a fine effort by the European Commission to close the loop with respect to existing cybersecurity regulation and to broaden the resilience with respect to the IoT ecosystem. So that's good, and we should welcome that. At the same time, it is not yet entirely clear, as mentioned before, how we want to manage compliance, how we can lower the burden for SMEs in particular who have to comply. We can afford that. Mastercard, Amazon, Google, we can do that. We have big departments working on these matters, and we will certainly comply. But at the same time, we want to bring along the SMEs. Many of our customers, since we are an open source company in the first place, come from the SME space. And we need to make sure that they can manage implementation, they can manage compliance costs, and they have a say when it comes to, for instance, standardization. Since harmonization of standards is so important, and they might not have the capacity to invest in work with Sensenelec, for instance, as we would do that. We can deploy experts participating in these bodies, and they can't afford that. So this is a concern, because regulation is only as good as its implementation later on, and as it adds value in practical terms once it's implemented. And we have to make sure that that's happening, so we can actually increase European cyber resilience as the Commission wanted it in the first place. And one look in the future, I'd say, with respect to the new Commission incoming, we have quite some regulation cybersecurity in place, which is great, and we should focus on implementing it the right way and not necessarily on jumping the gun immediately right away with respect to new regulation. I mean, looking at the AI Act, that's a massive, important piece of policy work, and there needs to be done more in that respect. But I think on cyber, we have to do a homework with respect to NIS2 implementation, DORA, and certainly the CRA, because we're not finished yet. And that's important, I think, for all of us.
Thank you. So from a Mastercard perspective, we are one of the biggest enablers of digital commerce in the world, and therefore we're driven to enable the security of it, to ensure inclusivity. And once you've got those two, you can begin to foster innovation, right from the biggest organizations in the world down to the small and medium enterprises. If we're able to build a sort of secure ecosystem, we start to reduce that barrier for entry, we start to increase it, we start to hire it, we start to prevent cyber criminals and fraudsters from entering the food chain by which it causes all these issues. They're only being able to do so because of faulty products or products and capabilities that are not kept up to speed with the vulnerabilities that we all face and the vulnerabilities that cyber criminals continue to exploit. So what we have to do now from a Mastercard perspective is build awareness, continue to educate the workforce, continue to educate the ecosystem. And we do that through a number of initiatives. We have our Strive initiative where we provide capabilities to the SME market to not only see the value of innovation and security by design, but be able to assess their capabilities, to be able to run tests, to run services in an affordable, understandable, and accessible manner. Because to Matthias' point, they don't potentially have the resources that we have at our disposal. They don't have a CISO. They may not have a network administrator, all those different capabilities. And if we do that, then that provides a suitable carrot for them to be more resilient. And speaking of carrots rather than sticks, and where there's a lot of regulators in the room, so there's a few sticks around, carrot is the opportunity. What we're going to see, in my opinion, from the Cyber Resilience Act is how that's going to inform procurement processes in years to come, or even weeks and months to come. It's a competitive advantage to be able to be cyber resilient, to have that that accreditation and prove to wannabe buyers that you have products and services that conform to regulatory and legal requirements, and that makes you much more attractive, much more resilient, and less likely to be impacted by cyber attacks.
Thank you so much. So I've heard a couple of reflections on security by design being part of the DNA, and it's the case for the large companies, but it's very different when we look at the situation of SMEs, and thank you, Tiberiu, for pointing out that the level of awareness is probably the first stumble block. Let's start there. I think it reflects very much what we've seen with that first question thrown at the audience. There's a level of awareness around the legal measures, and then there's a level of awareness around implementation, but we are not having a mature conversation about these issues just yet. And then we've heard about the need to have this unified framework for cybersecurity, which obviously has very different components, and one of that is around supply chains. So let me throw another question at the panel. When we think about supply chains and many of the incidents we've had recently, there's quite a bit to pack into that conversation. There's also a geopolitical dimension. This increasingly complex supply chain obviously need to pass through different jurisdictions, and it becomes very, very difficult to ensure security across. And I guess everybody is on the outlook. Everybody is exploring what the vulnerabilities might be, what the threats are. So how are you thinking about the threats coming from supply chains? And what have you done to address some of the threats? What are you putting in place? And Stephen, maybe I can start with you this time.
Okay, go that way. Okay, I mean, again, from Mastercard's perspective, we're in a unique position within the ecosystem. We see 140 plus billion transactions every year across our network. And that gives us an advantage to be able to gather threat intelligence, to be able to identify and prevent fraud, or identify, prevent money laundering, and also then to identify and try and prevent cybercrime from happening. And that's only good enough if we're protecting Mastercard. So we want to go beyond that and work with our customers, the supply chain, because if we can raise all boats in the harbour, we're all more resilient. But rather than looking at specific threat actors, I think everybody in the room knows, the APT groups, the organised crime groups, the nation states that we're all fending off at the moment. The biggest threats to us all are the scale of the issue. So ever-increasing supply chains, ever-increasing business objectives, and the drive for revenues means that we have to diversify. We have to look to increase our supply chain. That provides great opportunity from a business perspective, but that increases our attack surface. So that creates opportunity for cyber criminals. So scale is absolutely one of the biggest challenges. Secondly, it's about the globalization, the sort of hyper-connected ecosystem. Again, Mastercard and many of us on the panel here will be in a fortunate enough position to have the resources to be able to conduct that due diligence against our critical service providers. But again, being able to identify who they are, prioritize the vulnerabilities that exist within that ecosystem, and then absolutely mitigate them is of paramount importance. So that's how we're addressing those particular threats. And then the final point you made there about geopolitics. So this risk convergence, if I can call it that. So going beyond the cyber realm, again, from a Mastercard perspective, we have to be cognizant of the different risks that our organization face, that our critical service providers, that our partners, our key customers face from events around the world. The tragic circumstances in Israel, the Russian reinvasion of Ukraine. Atop the huge humanitarian crisis there, what we have to be guarded against and be contingent towards is what risks do those elements bring to our business? What potential reputational harm is coming towards Mastercard through a supplier, through a critical service provider that might indeed be sanctioned by the Western world? And it might not be in our immediate supply chain, but beyond, into our nth party supply chain. So looking at how we can identify that risk, and we use a capability called the systemic risk assessment. So that looks at cyber, geopolitics, ESG, financial, physical risk, all of these different elements that can impact our organizations, and again, helps us identify the risk, prioritize it, and then absolutely how we mitigate it.
Well, starting with threats, I think we see an ever-evolving threat landscape, and it's fast-growing. Nation-state actors are attacking more Western markets in particular. Cybercrime is on the rise. The numbers are massive. I think most of you are aware of the fast growth and the massive numbers here. Fast forward, what will we do about it? I'm not so much here to talk about supply chain in particular, but rather on remedies. And you mentioned secure by design before. Secure by design is built into the DNA of Google. We've been working on secure by design principles for many, many years. Secure by design comes first, and then there's secure by default on top of that for sure. And we are building our software, we're building our cloud services with secure by design in mind. The full software development lifecycle is embedded in our secure by design philosophy. And that being said, looking at the threat landscape and us affording to not only having intelligence on threats, because we have, for instance, Mandiant as part of Google now, as you know, providing fantastic threat intel, and we are sharing this with many of the agencies in the room and the governments sitting here. That's one step we are taking, and something we can afford as Google. But then what about the remedies? What about protecting yourselves from these threats? And that might affect supply chains as well. And my honest answer would be consider cloud. Consider cloud computing and consider something digital which is secure by design, where software has been built with the security of all customers and clients in mind. And that is for certainly true for the big cloud providers, AWS sitting here as well. We are designing our cloud services the way that if you would embark on a cloud journey, if you put your data in the cloud, you benefit from all these protections. You benefit from the intel we have and from our actions we take upon the intel we receive. So that is something that can be helpful, and that is a responsibility on big providers to provide first-class security via their cloud services. So small, medium enterprises and others as part of the supply chain can benefit from that because they couldn't necessarily afford that themselves, thinking about the massive threats we see here at scale, as my colleague alluded to.
Regarding threats, I will give my perspective. I don't know if it will resonate with the big companies around me. So a month before the war in Ukraine started, we've seen an increase of 25 to 30 times, an increase of really discovery scanning, which are the first steps when an attacker tries to find how to enter into a customer network. And that increase kept ramping up, so it's not lower now. It's higher, and it's not just the nation state, but there are also financially motivated cyber crimes which try purely to get content, leak content online, try to sell that content online to damage the reputation and ask for a ransomware fee. And all those things are very hard to do in isolation. So I believe that we can win this war, because it is a war, and the attackers are just increasing their ranks, because making money makes them getting more troops, and that's what we see. The number of threats increases also because the researchers are finding more and more weaknesses which were there but they have not been discovered. Now there are more researchers on the good part and on the bad side, and they find more vulnerabilities which are hard to patch in time, hard to mitigate if there is not a patch, because not for everything there is a patch. And I would say collaboratively, if we share this threat intelligence fast enough, then we can better protect, because each of the esteemed colleagues here, they have access to a huge traffic, to a huge source of CTI indicators, which give us maybe a half an hour awareness, proactive time to react, and if not completely block an attack, but at least mitigate it, get it in time, so before an attacker gets control to a complete network. Yeah. And security by design, it's very good, but it's very hard to maintain for small companies having products from everywhere. They have a firewall from one company, another firewall from another company, routers, switches, servers, multiple operating system, mobile devices, many entry points, which means a huge attack surface. And the hacker starts finding where is your weakest spot, where you are as strong as your weakest link. So they will find maybe a development site which is forgotten somewhere. They will find maybe an Amazon bucket or a Google or an Amazon cloud storage key. They will find ways if you don't really protect each of them. And unless you really have security embedded in all your processes, development processes, operational processes, it's very hard to go and retrofit, because even if today I start and I say I will do architecture by design, but what about what I have already in my infrastructure, in my application ecosystem? What do I do with them? I can't modernize them tomorrow. I need a plan, and that needs time, that needs money. So again, time which can be leveraged by attackers. If we leverage, and there is indeed, we follow Mandiant, we follow all the I would say the senior threat intelligence providers, and we share that. I would say that's our best chance to succeed and protect ourselves against a ever-growing number of attacks. And maybe last but not least is because back to architecture. So I love resilience, and the big accident, okay, we don't give names here, but you know, a major cloud provider was affected because or due to a security product, which is a very good security product, but which somehow released a faulty update. And some of our designers, they not just that they have their private cloud, their public cloud in one of your clouds, but they also started to, if I have clusters which are set of servers working together or server farms, I'm not putting all of them on the same operating system even. So I'm adapting the operating system. I'm putting different EDR providers now. So if an accident like the one it happened, it won't affect us. But this was a lesson learned after the incident. We could not think about that before. Now we are considering, and in fact we advise customers, you have a web farm, you will have half on one operating system, half on the other, you will have half on EDR, half on the other, so such an incident won't affect us. But again, we keep learning, and I just wanted to show that it's a continuous race, so it's not stopping tomorrow. Even if we protect and we are perfect, a day after tomorrow, somebody will find a new vulnerability, will find a new novel way of attacking our infrastructure. So we have to realize that it's a long race, and we have to get stamina and be prepared because it won't finish. It's a continuous race.
Yes, I can confirm that it resonates for everybody. I think, and what you said is relevant for all type of organization, SME or big companies. So indeed, the supply chain is clearly becoming more and more complex, more and more global, more and more innovative with new technology inside, and then create a lot of vulnerabilities that we need to tackle. So definitely that's complex for small enterprise, that's complex for large enterprise, and we need to find a way to support everybody in this direction. So perhaps on the threat and the vulnerability, I will to emphasize on two that resonate for us. The first one is the data breaches. Indeed, data breach is not new, but the fact that we have in this new supply chain, this new modern supply chain, I would say, we are creating some other opportunity for the vulnerability, I would say. And then it is important that not only we take care about the data as how we secure the data in secure environment, but as well how we treat the data all over the journey of the data, from all the communication of this data in the different systems. And that's what we need to emphasize now, is how we have some solution to secure the data in the backend. Now how we are going to ensure this data is keeping the full integrity in the full value chain, so with API security, with code signing, etc. So that's the first threat that is coming with this new supply chain. The second, perhaps I wanted to highlight, is the new supply chains as well. As you said just before, we have more and more stakeholders, more and more we need to interact with a lot of various providers, suppliers, partners, etc., in order to have the full supply chain working. What is important then is how we ensure the integrity of the security between all of them, knowing that every actor will not have the same level of standard security, hence the importance of standardization, but as well the importance of the establishing of security framework, as I was mentioning earlier, like a zero trust workshop framework, which is very important to ensure the security. Then on that aspect, there are some actions that can be done, and there are some solutions available. MFA is one of them. How the multi-factor authentication can support this activity to really ensure that everybody can strongly authenticate themselves to have access to the zero trust network. We can have some different standards coming as well. There is a standard that is popping up at the moment, which is a FIDO standard, which is a standard that will help a lot of organizations to get access to some devices, some activities, some software that will give a certain level of security. So supply chain is improving and evolving a lot, but there are new threats, but there are some solutions to start to absorb this threat.
Well, I think a lot of the points I'd like to make have already been covered. But just to say, you know, the threat landscape is always evolving, and you know, supply chain or other sorts of possibilities is something that we're always taking a really hard look at. But a big piece of how we you know, really take action meaningfully on that is engaging across the industry, across law enforcement, across regulators. You know, a good example of that was that AWS was a part of. The U.S. Justice Department announced on October 16th charges against a pretty significant cyber attack for hire service. That was the result of a great deal of collaboration, including threat intelligence that was provided by AWS. We have kind of a threat intelligence network that we call MadPot, which is just honeypots all over the place collecting intelligence and feeding that into a neural network that analyzes those threats. And then there's a bunch of outputs for that, some of which are going to other partners that we engage with across the industry, but also into our own product, Guard Duty. So that's a product that we will then feed those results out to customers to give them insight along those lines. But I think just two points there in summary. The threat landscape is always evolving. We're looking at all of it, and it takes a village because these threats are global. They affect all of us, and you know, collaboration there is key.
Thank you. This is a global challenge, indeed. We've started a panel by thinking about what's happening in Europe, and obviously Europe is a big part of that conversation, but when you talk about supply chain, it has to be global. And I guess I wanted to ask you on that final point, Alec, on collaboration, how do you see this going forward? Because we have the companies, we have the industry, obviously we have the governments, we have regulators of all sorts, and civil society organizations doing some good work as well on the ground, trying to keep people safe. So what would be your wish list? And I'll turn to the whole panel now. I'm not going to give you the option of 3 wishes, just one. So we keep our promise to the audience and get some questions. Just one. What would be your main wish? You know, the magic wand exercise. How could you improve that collaboration?
So I would say that the collaboration between industry and regulators, you know, we have a saying that we use a lot at Amazon. I doubt we invented it. That we don't suffer the tyranny of the or, right? Saying that oh well, we need to have some security advancement, but it could potentially cause this degradation in customer functionality. Well, that's not okay. Like, we can do both, right? We can figure out how to innovate and be able to still have the right level of security and transparency for the purposes of regulation. So I think recognizing that the goals of what the regulations, I have yet to see, and this is just my personal opinion, but looking at the true honest goals that the regulation have been talking about here, they're laudable, right? The devil is very much in those details in terms of the consequences they can have that are almost always unintended. So making sure that we take those into account and figure out how do we have the right outcome that the regulation is going after, but also deliver the innovation and the value to Europe and to the world.
I think the wish you mentioned was a bit the same as wanted to mention, the collaboration between the industry and the standardization body and the regulation body, for sure. But perhaps I can extend a bit more, and I think the collaboration between the different industry vendors as well, between the vendors and the customers. I think we are discussing about security by design inside our product, inside the different product of the market, but what is important as well is probably to have a security by design for the ecosystem. And I think that's good to have some very good, strong product that are designed, secured, but it's good as well that all these products are coming to a global solution that is a global security by design ecosystem. So I think it's perhaps a new concept, but it's important, and it is probably something that can start with the more standardization, more regulation, and to have a more harmonized process. But I think it's not enough. We need to go further and to really have this collaboration between the different industry players.
From my point of view, because I'm looking what I wish, yeah, and I would say it will be great if we'll have, for example, anonymized data from the big cloud provider, from AWS, from Google, from Microsoft, to be able to train models, train machine learning models, or educate SOC teams, because there are very few companies like Mastercard, Visa, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Oracle. They are the biggest players in cloud. They have access to a lot of threat events, and somehow to share a part of it so others can train their SOC teams, because there is a lack of cybersecurity personnel, and there are not enough engineers. And the last time I've read, there were between 4 and 5 million cybersecurity related jobs specialists required, and you can't teach them just by doing videos and doing courses online and so on. They really need to hone their skills, to test their skills, to try to find an attack indicator, to try to find advanced threat hunting in a large data sets today. And I did that research many times. You do not find the research data sets for training cybersecurity teams. Yeah, but we do part of one of our projects, but it won't compare with any of yours. And it will be really beneficial if I'm sure that there is exchange of CTI information between the biggest cloud providers, because they will be the first to see potential signs of new types of attacks. But it's not enough. We should have a broader community, and to help building that community, we can do it by sharing anonymized data lakes, relevant data lakes, exactly from the honeypots, because every large cloud provider will have honeypots. From those honeypots, anonymized and shared larger data sets, because it will help building a more secure community. Back to the regulation, they are good. We have to be careful, as it was mentioned previously, not to overdo it, to ramp it up a little bit, and not to get lost in details. Because sometimes we see regulation which, they are like checking a box, like the airplane checklist. And it's not the same, yeah? Because one, it's superseding the others, and sometimes I really have to see the big picture to see what I need to secure. Because people are doing checkboxes. I have encryption at rest. Yes, you have encryption at rest, checkbox. But if the access to that application is not well managed, and one official user of the application can exfiltrate and dump all the data, and after that putting on his USB drive or sending somewhere online, there is no point of having that security at rest, or double security of the file system, security of the VM, security of the database, because somebody in titles with a role in the application can exfiltrate that data. And the regulation a little bit, I see, it's challenging, because they are used to check boxes, and it's not as simple as it is in cybersecurity. Everything is layered, and sometimes you have to see the big picture, which of my controls supersedes the others, and focus on those. And yes, you mentioned MFA or MFA, phishing resisting MFA. Oh.
We're writing this down.
Sorry.
So your wish is to have regulation that goes beyond the checklist.
I have the right audience, so I dare to say it.
But no, absolutely. Thank you. I'm just aware of the time, and I want to invite everybody in the audience to get ready for questions. So we'll go to Matthias. One wish, please. Yeah,
big +1 on addressing the European cybersecurity skills gap. We are with you on that. Working on it. My wish, I'm taking a step back. I think we all agree that collaboration is key and that there needs to be more collaboration in public-private sector. I would add a geopolitical component to it. We would like to use the moment we have due to daunting circumstances with the Russian invasion in Ukraine and a war in Middle East. You might call it differently, but bad things are happening there. And then, of course, the North Korean regime or the Iranian regime doing bad actions on the web. The West needs to gather, and I think NATO needs to play a role here. And we stand with Western partners, Western governments as Google. We want to come together and we want to overcome, let's say, supercharging regulation, in particular in Europe, with politics, because we have bigger fish to fry, bigger concerns, and stuff we need to come on the same page for. It is just so important to do the right things these days because we have common threats as the West, and that means in particular the transatlantic partnership here and NATO. And we should support cyber defense as big tech players. That's our responsibility. And I would like to see more of that, and I would like to see more bandwagoning between the US government and the European Commission and national governments in Europe, and us being their partner on their side, addressing these threats in a joint fashion.
So I get the last wish, no pressure. Okay, some great points, but my biggest one, and I go back to what Dan said in the first keynote here, is about changing the perception of cybersecurity being a cost center to try and change that into being an investment. I think you know, we all work together, governments, regulators, private sector, public sector. The main difficulty, or one of the biggest difficulties we face, is that justification of the investment in cybersecurity capabilities. It's always seen a cost. But what we're seeing now with the Cyber Resilience Act, with DORA, with NIS2, is a tip of the cap really from the regulators against the adversary. It's very much gone from nice to have to need to have. So it shouldn't need that additional level of justification when we're going to our chief finance officers, our investors and more. If we're able to switch it to be an investment in cybersecurity than a cost, then I think we'll get more traction, will lead to more economic prosperity.
That's a wonderful list of wishes. Thank you. I can't promise that we're going to make all of that happen, but it's definitely good to have it out there. I'm just going to look for hands up for any questions from the public. I'm informed we have 5 minutes left. Yes. Can you stand up when you ask your question quickly? Yeah. I don't know if there's a microphone coming. If not, I can repeat the question for...
Thank you very much for your interesting discussion and expressing your wishes. In an ideal world, we would all want your wishes to come true, of course. But I'm Sabika Isak, and I'm a CISO at one of the consultancy organizations in Luxembourg, which is a very heavily regulated jurisdiction, and the industry that I come from is the financial industry, also a very heavily regulated industry. But my question to you would be, a part of that question is perhaps already addressed in your discussion, but with the rise of the sophisticated threats actors that we see and the platforms that you represent, like the AWS or Google or Mastercard, for example, and you do provide a real-time attack insights, how can organizations working in heavily regulated industry leverage upon these tools and platforms to identify and mitigate the interconnected risks within the supply chain?
Okay, I'll take a first stab. So it's about a collective responsibility here. And earlier this year, Mastercard opened our European Cyber Resilience Center. It's a center that is there to foster that collaborative effort. It's there to provide and to share threat intelligence, not information, because anyone can gather information these days. It's about the unique lens that we have, providing those insights, whether that's sector-specific, market or country-specific, and working with organizations, regulators and government to try and dispel the threat that we all see, but also to learn best practice and learn bad practice. Everyone talks about best practice and bad practice. But cyber criminals are doing it, organized criminal groups are doing it, and nation states are doing it. They're sharing secrets, they're sharing practices when law enforcement take them down or private sector get involved and reduce their operations. So absolutely, we have to have a collective responsibility, and our European Cyber Resilience Center is aimed at doing that.
Any other insights from the panel?
I believe I know the situation in Luxembourg. It's a PSF law, right? Which is the most strict of all. We know because we do have some customers, and again, the key is having the cyber threat intelligence information from as many sources as you can, and have somebody really react if there is a threat. Today we integrate from 30 sources, I believe 15,000 CTIs every day, and we are a small security service provider. So the key is getting from as many sources, because today it might be on Amazon that they see it first, tomorrow might be on Google or on Microsoft or on Oracle, or Mastercard might send an indicator of compromise. It's important to be connected to all of them. And that was back to my wish that they work together and we have access to at least some training data which can be shared, but it's key. And there is one other aspect for PSF. I believe you need to be hosted in Luxembourg, which today it's a little bit, yeah, for me, backwards, you know, medieval way. But it's the way it is, yeah? So you need to have your server there or your application there, which are fed by threat feeds from all the big players, the big defenders. Because indeed, today we are the Western world, and yeah, US, I must say, it's ahead of us. They had the NIST, and after that we came with the NIST 2. They are ahead of us, but collectively, today we are working on the same side, because there are 4 big states which can be named: North Korea, China, Russia, Iran. They will be seen in any threat indicator. If we target a threat indicator for financial sector, you will see the most there will be, and sometimes they will be targeting Luxembourg, sometimes they will targeting Belgium, or other parts of Europe or US. It's a map which is updating continuously, hour by hour. So what today is in one way, tomorrow it will be maybe a complete different attack, complete different groups, but usually the big 4, not the big 4 consultancy company, but the big 4 attacker nation state, because those are the most, I would say, dangerous. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have one other burning question just in front. It's not burning. How are we doing on time? Are we allowed to take one more? Okay, let's take it. Let's take this question. Speak up. Yeah.
So this is Daniele Catteto, CTO of Cloud Security Alliance. So let's focus on the supply chain protection. We discussed about the unbalanced situation between big players and small and medium companies. You mentioned about SBOM. So kind of 2 questions. The first one is that it is realistic to think that larger player can help small and medium companies that are typically their customers in building and then automatizing that SBOM. As we talk about supply chain protection, clearly zero trust comes to mind as one of the few kind of strategic approach to fix the problem. So I was wondering, what's your take there? How do you think we can instill a culture of zero trust within our ecosystem? And I would have another question for Steve, but we can push it.
Maybe over lunch. That's all right. Let's go to this question. So how can larger companies help smaller ones?
You look more eager than me.
I mean, it's a complicated topic, right? Because it's very, very specific in terms of even how a given piece of software is used, right? And that just adds in a great degree of nuance. Yeah, I think it's there's a lot that I know that we're all looking at how to figure out and think about what the SBOM management looks like, and it's just going to be very nuanced. So I think that there's certainly opportunities for big companies to help the small companies, but things like CVE databases and things like that, there's already mechanisms to identify where issues are in a lot of cases. But tracking those down in terms of following the trail of breadcrumbs through software, through forks, through various other aspects, that's where the challenge is. So as an industry as a whole, regardless of how individual companies have addressed it, I think it's a good call out that we're not there yet. We need to keep going.
I just said 2 of your biggest qualities that you can have as a big company working with SMEs are trust and empathy. if you can exude those two and have the SME trust in the capabilities and the services that you're providing, and that you can level with them. You know, you're not talking international organizations, a multi-international organization. You have to make your products, your services, and the way that you provide those suitable to the SMEs. So again, to my earlier point, they have to be understandable, they have to be affordable, and they have to be accessible, and how they integrate those capabilities within their systems. So you have to build those capabilities for them. You know, we have the budget, we have the capabilities, we have the know-how, and that's what we've done pretty much throughout the pandemic and beyond, because that's where we really started to see the SMEs become the perennial victims of cyber attacks. So we've taken our way forward. We have a capability called My Cyber Risk, which is part of our acquisition of Risk Recon. We provide that through governments, through acquirers, through issuers, so that our SMEs, or the SMEs that are in the ecosystem, can have access to those different types of capabilities.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, I would just add that, as we all said, collaboration is key. We have Google Safety Engineering Centers in Europe, one in Malaga, focusing on cybersecurity for enterprises, and one in Munich, focusing on consumer privacy and security, and one in Dublin, focusing on content topics, which is a whole different animal. But these centers are available for customers, clients, and partners to go there and talk to engineers in a safe environment, look into details, and figure out joint solutions as to the best extent possible. That's why we have these safety engineering centers in Europe, so folks even don't have to fly to the US, but can get that intel and support here.
Thank you very much, and I'm afraid we are running out of time. I'm really happy to see that we've started the conversation, and I hope it continues beyond this panel. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists today, and we'll see you around at the conference and probably continue some of these conversations one-on-one in the corridors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, but please don't leave just yet. We do have another keynote speech. And as we've seen, cooperation is key, this with regard with cybersecurity, but in other areas as well. And I would like to look upon Hungary now, because our next guest is from Hungary, Lajos Szabó, Director of National Cybersecurity Center from Hungary. I would like to welcome him onto the stage, please.